So when I was struggling in my life with emotional eating, that was a huge one for me. And I had a huge barrier put up there, wall of protection. The food was my comfort. It was the soothing. It was what I went to try and numb and suppress and escape and flee when life gets tough and when you don't want to feel those emotions. And I'll never forget when I sat with my therapist and she said to me, and it was one of those aha moments, she said to me, so who would you be if we took this away from you? So if you didn't have emotional eating, how would that make you feel? And I'll never forget just my going, oh my God, no, wait, you can't take that away from me. What would I do? I would die, 'cause it was my crutch. So the very thing I wanted to heal was the very thing I wasn't willing to release and let go of. So I had to accept that it was a coping mechanism, to accept my journey, that I was feeling uncomfortable feelings, and go back and try and heal those feelings rather than just treat the symptom.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today with my guest, Miriam Hussey. Miriam is an integrative lifestyle pharmacist, founder of Soul Space with her husband, Jerry Hussey, keynote speaker and business all-star winner, thought leader in health and performance. She's the author of the great new book, Light Up, Energize Your Body, Awaken Your Mind and Supercharge Your Soul, which is available everywhere now. You might recognize her voice from episode 345 on September 6, 2021, wellness coach Miriam Hussey on reducing anxiety and stress, managing energy levels, and building your self-worth. Today's podcast, we are going to jump into how we can light up our lives, our souls, and get into that place of fulfillment moving forward. Miriam, welcome back to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Brian. Absolutely delighted to be back. I can't believe it's been that long since we've chatted on a podcast. So
it's because we've overlapped so often at different events and, being Galway people, sometimes we can overlap in places. So it doesn't feel as long, but this is only the second time we've spoken publicly on the podcast. So again, very long overdue. I want to talk about the book. So you broke it up into 3 sections, which I love: body, mind, soul. So we'll take it in that order because a lot of people listening here will jump to one of the 3 depending on what season of life they're in, what stage of their journey they're on. Generally, I found that it was body for me, then mind, then soul, in the order of the book in terms of what I was able to prioritize, and then I started to level up with frequencies, vibrations. Talk to us a little bit about the body to start, and understanding stress and finding calm, and then we'll transition into things like movement as medicine, overcoming brokenness with the rest, recovery, repair, sleep, etc.
yeah, so exactly as you said, I created the book to have it in that order because the body is generally where people start, and for obvious reasons, because it's tangible, it's what we can see, and we often think when it comes to our health, our well-being, our performance, we often look at, okay, let's move the body, let's exercise, let's eat well, let's manage our stress, look after our sleep. And of course, there are 4 incredibly important pillars that absolutely are incredibly important for our health. But then lesser of the 3 pillars, I suppose, we start to move into as we look at the second one, which is the mind. And I'm just giving you an overview first before we go into each section separately, just to give it context. So I often think of it like there's 3 circles. So the outer circle is the physical body. Then you go into the inner circle, or it's like those, Russian dolls where you have one inside the other. The next circle in is the mind, and this houses your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings. And we all know now more than ever, I think, the importance of that mind-body connection and how we're feeling in our thoughts and in our minds, and how our emotions have a direct impact on our nervous system and thus on our health. But lesser of the 3, if you go in again, is the soul. And I think, to be honest, Brian, this is, I believe, the biggest pillar in our modern world of wellness that's missing. Because if you're not connected to the soul, if you're not aligned to your truth, if you're not listening to those soul's whispers, well, then you're going to be off balance. You're going to have disharmonious energy regulating through running through the body. And what happens, it's like, I always say, you have to go inward to connect to the soul script. So that's getting still, getting quiet, so you can listen, so you can hear those intuitive messages. But then you have to give it the space for the soul to expand and light up. But if you're living a life that's not aligned to your truth, so you're in a job that you don't particularly like, but you're in it because you should be in it. You're in a relationship that's not lighting you up, but it's all grand on paper, so you stay stuck there. Or you're, for example, a gay man, but you're not outwardly expressing that. So this inner essence of your truth is being suppressed or squeezed or denied. And what happens is like the pebble effect, I call it. You throw a pebble into a pond and you see the ripples. So if that soul has been suppressed, squeezed, you're living a life that's not true to you, what happens is everything is energy. So you start to send a distress signal out from your soul, which is who you are. It's your inner spark of life. It's what makes you different to everybody else. It's your characteristics, your goals, your dreams, your passions, your desires. If that's not been allowed to flow freely, a distress signal gets sent out from the inner circle, the soul, into the next circle, the mind. So then our mind becomes anxious, irritated, frustrated. We don't know what's going on. We're just not feeling right in our mind, overwhelmed. And then in that place, what happens is our thoughts are energy frequency. So then we start to dump this nervous frequency into the outer body, which is the physical, into the nervous system. And then our nervous system gets dysregulated. And when our nervous system is dysregulated, what happens? You get the manifestation of ill health, disease, a lack of ease. But what we tend to do in the modern world is we band-aid and we symptom and we treat the symptom, not just with the good stuff. I mean, the exercise, all of those things, the food is important, but sometimes we're still band-aiding with the good stuff without actually lifting the lid and pulling out the threads and going a bit deeper to see, well, what is the root of the lack of ease in me in the first place? What am I not living that's aligned to my truth? What am I not allowing to light up and be expressed in me in my day-to-day life that then's causing this void within or this suppression within that's causing these ripple effects of distress? So I just wanted to set the context from the get-go as coming from a pharmacist where everything was treated from the external. Everything was a pill for every ill. Everything was a band-aid. To really look deeper, and my journey into yoga taught me this, Brian, because in yoga you talk about the koshas, the 5 sheets or the 5 layers. And you start on your yoga mat where you breathe, you move, which is starting at the physical level. So you start to stretch and you move the body. Then what brings you in is the breath. The breath draws you into the energetics. The breath, I believe, is the gateway to opening the heart, which is the essence of the soul. So as you breathe, as you move and as you breathe, you start to drop from the physical into the mental, the emotional, and then you start to go deeper and deeper into the soul. And that's why at the end of a yoga class, when you lie in Shavasana, it's that bliss state, it's that peaceful state, it's that aha, it's the shoulders drop. That's the soul piece. And if we could connect to that more regularly, and if we listened to that and we followed our essence rather than our ego, which is the head, I think we'd have a lot less disease.
Let's start with that instead, Mir, because people listening to this podcast, I have, with 570 plus episodes, 700 plus with bonuses, have probably talked the body side to death when it comes to the food, the movement, the training, the sleep. And they are very important. But what I'm hearing you say, and I love the order, that it's feeding back, because sometimes we think, and again, I've done this because our brain is a logical, contextual machine, that you're like, well, body, you can see it, mind, you have an idea, and then the soul is underneath, and you go in that order, where actually going in the reverse, it's technically a positive feedback loop if you can get the underlying issue with the soul right, because it feeds into your mind, which feeds into your body, which feeds into the sleep, the stress, the food choices, etc. Let's talk about listening to the soul and the soul whispers, because people fall on two sides of this. An old version of me, and I'll put myself in the context for those listening who fall on one side of the spectrum, where because I couldn't physically see it and because I couldn't emotionally tune into it, I just assumed it wasn't something that mattered. And what I didn't know then that I know now is listening to your soul is a skill you acquire, a habit you form, and it's a voice that you need to train yourself to tune into. For those that are listening who are struggling with the soul whispers or struggling to listen to their soul, whether it's a relationship that doesn't light them up, whether it's a job that they're not into, whether it's a workout regimen or fitness philosophy that just seems misaligned at the minute, how do you recommend people start listening to some of those soul whispers?
So the first thing I believe that we have to do is, firstly, it's to strip back the judgment and the shoulds and the coulds. And I actually talk about in the book, it's a rule by A. So the first place is the awareness. So as you said, maybe we weren't aware, people aren't aware that this even exists, or it's important, or is even related to our health. You know, people often say the soul is spirituality and that's religion, and sure, that's not for me. But if you were actually to pare that back and tell people, no, the soul is actually the essence of your true health and vitality, people will then might say, okay, I'm listening, tell me more. So we have to have the awareness. Then there's a level of acknowledgement, right? So you're acknowledging your journey, you're acknowledging where you're at without the judgment. And then there's that acceptance piece. Okay. So this is just to get us in, right? Then you move into that action place where you can actually do something different. And then the last A is that achievement. So you're starting to celebrate those mini wins. But why I mentioned that rule by A is because if we don't have the awareness first and foremost, well, then nothing can shift or change. Okay. So I believe the biggest gateway to get into the soul is we firstly have to remove ourselves from the distractions and the busyness of our everyday life. Because what's happening is we're always in this constant go, plugged in, social media, work, lists, emails, blah, 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 100 million things flying, floating through the air, floating through our mind, keeping us locked in that sympathetic stage of the nervous system, which is that fight and flight, and you're going and you're going. If we're constantly in that stage, well, then we can't listen to the whispers of the soul. We are being bombarded with everybody else's life that we're using as a way to disconnect, to disassociate, and create a disjoint in our own life. So in order to create a reconnect and to harmonize and to create cohesion, we have to go within. So the first thing is we have to remove ourselves from the distraction. So get out into nature without the headphones, without the external noise, without listening to anything else. Bring a pen and paper, sit by the sea, go up a mountain, breathe, meditate, journal. These are all the simple things that we all know are really important. But when we do them regularly, it allows us to drop. It allows us to untangle from the web of the external world, and it allows us to drop into the essence and presence of ourselves. As I said earlier, I believe when we breathe, we start to open the heart. Then you start to bring awareness to the heart. You start to melt the walls of protection that we possibly have barricaded around our heart for years so that we keep our demons locked in and love shielded out. So I often say in my poem in the book of surrendering, I said, so we have to surrender. We have to be willing to let go. We have to be willing to drop into an uncomfortable space to meet the emotions that we've been running from. Because if we don't, what happens is these emotions stay within us. If they're already there, they've already created a home and residency. It took up residency within your body. So it's like a parasite. And if you started to neglect them and not listen to them, they just grow power. And it's like a bottle of fizzy water. If you close the lid and keep it locked, but you keep shaking it, that's like our life at times. We're getting tossed around, we're getting shake. And the bottle is the vessel, the bottle is the human body. That's the physical. And what's getting tossed around is our hormones, and the stress is shaking us. But if we're keeping the lid locked, what's happening is the power is still building within. And then eventually what happens, boom, you get that explosion. You get that release, you get that outburst, you get that breakdown or that burnout. So what we want to be doing, Brian, is to, if we can, regularly having the awareness to keep the lid a little bit open so the cyst kind of is coming out. The emotions are being allowed without overwhelming us. They're being allowed to be felt, to be released, to be expressed in a healthy way, so that therefore then we can drop in and keep listening without the overwhelm. And the biggest thing I truly believe is that people say to me, they're like, but you know what, Miriam, if it's my soul's purpose, should it not be easy? You know, if it's aligned for me, should it not just be all roses and all be easy to make that decision? And I always say, absolutely not. Yes and no. Because you're 30, 40 years of untangling the shit, excuse my French. You have to remove yourself from all the ways that you've been trained to think is the right way. You've been living and conforming possibly to a life that isn't actually true to you. And you have to unravel that and unpack that. And that is painful and that can be hard. But I really believe, and this book is all about you returning back to your truth. And the truth will set you free. But it's not without its challenges. It's not without its moments of, oh my God, you know. But it's when we sit into it, when we listen to it, when we truly, truly allow time and space to breathe and drop and open the heart. And I always do is I ask a question, drop in a question when I'm in that space. What is my soul asking me for? What is my soul longing for? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? Where would you have me go? And then you just sit and you breathe and you listen and you feel. And in that spaciousness, things come, insights come, awareness, visions, feelings, just a knowingness. And the more we do that, we start to know the difference between the voice of the ego and the voice of the essence. The voice of the ego is frantic, it's busy, it's fear-driven. It's kind of like that Tasmanian devil that's revved up in sugar and da 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 da. But the voice of the essence has a wisdom to it. There's a strength there, but it's soft. It's not rushed, it's not forced. And it's leaning from a place of love. It's like listening to two different radio stations.
It's beautiful. It's something I've always thought, that the soul whispers, it very rarely shouts. And I know when I'm sitting in a meditative state, the thing that's shouting at me is normally ego. And the thing that's subtly whispering is normally soul, essence, as a check-in for me. And there's a line, I did a podcast recently with Peter Crone, who we're both massive fans of.
Amazing.
And he's an incredible human being, but he was speaking about that difficulty of soul searching, finding freedom, that it's like going to the gym. He used the analogy of with lifting weights. He was like, how do you build strength and muscle? He was like, you create resistance. He was like, you create resistance and that's what does it. He was like, finding your soul essence and tuning into that is, there's resistance in your life that you need to work through. And that pain is the path to freedom, which ties on to another topic we actually touched on in that podcast that I had to meditate on after, because it was just a very small synopsis that I kind of want to unpack here, because you've given me an unintentional segue with awareness into acceptance. This is something that, and again, I'll use myself as a focus group of one with the hopes that people listening are struggling with something similar, that awareness is there. You know there's something you need to accept, but I still struggle with that part, that acceptance of guilt, shame, loneliness, anger, validating it, seeing it, expressing it in a healthy way. For those who are similar with the acceptance elements, because it's very difficult from my experience, focus group of one, to move through that. What's something that you recommend, or something that if people are looking to tune into that inner essence of truth, but the block, and the line Peter gave me is that none of us are blocked, we're self-protecting. And that was a big mental shift for me, where I'm like, oh, my heart's not blocked, I'm self-protecting. What would you say to somebody who's struggling with the acceptance element, and either because of their own language, quote unquote, blocked, or they're self-protecting, or for some reason they just can't accept what is, what was, what will be, that whole element and paradox of control, that we think we've got control when the universe is actually just moving around us and we're just pawns on the chessboard for the most part. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I love that. And I, touched on it earlier when I said about we keep the, we're protecting, it's a wall of protection that we put up around the heart. And that is a coping mechanism. It's a survival mechanism, because we've been wounded in the past, and the soul is now longing to be sewn back together. But we've been tethered, and we've been frightened, and we've been, potentially something has happened, in your younger life that has shocked you or frightened you. And it's a trauma, and we all experience trauma. They don't have to be big T traumas, and you know that more than anybody. It's the little T traumas that accumulate and compound. And then what happens is we harden, they imprint within the heart, and they harden and they accumulate and they compound, and then it's like a wall goes up. And to melt that wall. So in the book, I talk a lot about the freeze response. But in order to get from freeze to freedom, in order to get to that acceptance place, we first have to thaw, and we have to melt, and we have to go through that thawing process. In order to accept, the acceptance part is, you can't accept unless you have compassion, self-compassion. And to get to that compassionate place, it involves, I believe, doing that inner work, that inner child work. So if you are locked in a space where controlling, you're protecting the self, you're not actually protecting yourself. You're actually harming yourself. And if you can shift that and reframe that to saying, actually, I'm doing myself a disservice here by not letting love in or out, because love it's a two-way frequency. but we can't be just spilling it out. We have to be sending it back to ourselves, from ourselves, and allowing it to circulate around our blood to every cell, to every organ, to every tissue and every bone energetically, so that our body feels the love from ourselves back to ourselves. And I really believe that the acceptance part, so when I was struggling in my life with emotional eating, that was a huge one for me. And I had a huge barrier put up there, wall of protection. The food was my comfort. It was the soothing. It was what I went to try and numb and suppress and escape and flee when life gets tough and when you don't want to feel those emotions. And I'll never forget when I sat with my therapist and she said to me, and it was one of those aha moments, she said to me, so who would you be if we took this away from you? So if you didn't have emotional eating, how would that make you feel? And I'll never forget just my going, oh my God, no, wait, you can't take that away from me. What would I do? I would die, you know, because it was my crutch. So the very thing I wanted to heal was the very thing I wasn't willing to release and let go of. So I had to accept that it was a coping mechanism, to accept my journey, that I was feeling uncomfortable feelings, and go back and try and heal those feelings rather than just treat the symptom. So with someone who's struggling to accept, first you have to go and understand what's causing you. What's the reason behind you, why you've hardened? What's the trauma that has caused the frozenness? And are you willing to let this melt and release? Because if you're not, you're going to be like that ice block going through life, hardened. And really what you need to do this is you need support. So if I put an ice block and I just plonk it onto the counter and it starts to melt, the water will just go everywhere. But if I get an ice block and I put it into a glass, then it starts to melt, the water's contained, it's held. So who holds you? Who supports you? Where do you feel safe? Where can you go to just let everything melt and drop away and know that you're going to be held with love and compassion and not judgment and shame? Shame and guilt are two of the lowest vibrational frequency energies that we can carry. Everyone intermixes them, but they're quite different.
Mm-hmm.
Guilt is, I have done something wrong. Shame is, I am wrong. So we have to unravel that, and that inner child work is going back to visiting yourself. I always do a very powerful meditation. I get people to go back to revisit themselves when they're a child, 6, 7, 8, and they witness them and they talk to them and they see them. Because really what happens is we feel we're not seen. We feel we're not heard. We're not valued. We're not enough. So then we start to, in our adult life, to do whatever we can to be seen, to get the job, to be in the perfect relationship, to have the perfect body, whatever will get us seen and approved of, so that we'll be liked for who we are, not for what we do, rather than who we are. So we have to go back to that inner child and say, I see you, I hear you, I've got you, and I love you. And the minute you feel loved, truly from yourself to yourself, then the walls will come down. Then, because you're not trying to protect yourself from like a whiplash or another blow, because you know you've got yourself. You know you're holding yourself, and you know you're with yourself no matter what.
From experience, Miriam, because I love all of that and agree completely. The inner child work, and I've talked about that at length on the podcast, was something I was very resistant to in the early days. Carol Jung, what you most need is where you least want to look. I was very resistant to it. I was like, no, not going there. That's poor shit. Pardon my French as well. I'm not doing that. And then as I started to explore it bit by bit, I started to see the change. I started to see the present day effects of creating a gap between stimulus and response. And I was like, oh no, that's my younger self that's now reacting as opposed to responding to a situation. Now that took time. For me, it was probably the course of 3, 4, 5 years. For those that are listening, and you might have different timelines, and I would imagine it's probably similar to like a fitness habit. Someone with a bad habit for 20 years, it's like knocking on an oak tree versus digging up a seed from the ground, versus someone who has a bad habit for the last month. A lot easier to break it. When it comes to inner child work and seeing some of the benefits, and yourself and Jerry do this better than anybody, in my opinion, when it comes to getting people to heal what's going on within from a soul level, shifting the frequency, shifting the vibration so that people can live the life that they were put here to live. What is an expected timeline for people so that we go to the gym, you want to lose weight, 6 weeks, you can lose a lot of weight. You want to build muscle, it's probably going to take closer to 6 months. You want to heal a relationship with food that's been bad for 20 years, might take up to a year plus, etc. With inner child work, from your years of work, what have you seen as kind of a normal, will people start to notice the benefits straight away? Does it take longer, like gratitude journaling, where the research shows that it takes several weeks to kick in? What's been your experience with that so that people can kind of align their expectations accordingly?
It's not a quick fix. It's definitely not an overnight miracle cure. As I mentioned earlier, if your years of living in a certain way, carrying a certain, energy, or living from a subconscious program, that does take time. But it's not to be rushed, because the healing is in the unraveling and the healing is in the feeling. And you can't just sprint past that. Speed hides the need. So we have to slow everything down. We have to graciously and gently go inwards with that open, compassionate heart, knowing that it's not a sprint, knowing that everybody is different. So everybody's journey is different, and everybody's route through it and into it and out of it will be different. And it's a lifelong journey. I mean, nobody's perfect. Nobody, myself included, absolutely not. And to think otherwise is to be deluded, So we all are beautifully broken. We all have our flaws. And I truly believe that's what makes us whole. That's what makes us wholesome, is when we can share those vulnerabilities with openness and not have the need to try and put up a mask and try and keep, because the strain of that is so exhausting, living, with this, within a certain archetype, this one or that one, or the pretty one or the healthy one or this one. We're all a mix of everything. So when it comes to healing those inner wounds, those inner traumas, it's slow and steady wins the race. But it has to be done regularly, where you're going to really commit to a lifestyle of honoring yourself, of nourishing yourself, of moving away from the superficial external needs to please and conform. And it does take work. I mean, I often say it's like the butterfly. So you have a caterpillar and he's walking around there and he's happy out and this is great or whatever. And next thing, the caterpillar is in a cocoon. And the caterpillar is probably going, what the hell is this? Like, I was out there, it was grand. Like, what? And it's like someone in a relationship, it's grand, or in a job, sure, it's grand, But then they go into the cocoon and it's like, this is really awful. What is this? I'm in a dark, scary place. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. It's really scary and unknown. That's sometimes when we listen and we start to go in and listen to the whispers of the soul, or we start to feel things, or we start to unearth things. And people say, well, why in hell would you be doing that? Well, it's like a bucket of dirty water. Unless you put the water in, you gotta clean it up. And then the muck does swirl around until it gets clean. And it's like the caterpillar in the cocoon. But then when the cocoon bursts, the butterfly flies, it's incredible. It's like a total new life. You can now fly. You have wings. Like, it's total liberation. Now, as you asked me, what's the timeline? As I said, it's different for everybody. One thing I would say is it's important to go back and do the work. But then it's important that you don't stay stuck there and start to stew in that, because you start to replay and refire the neurons of the past or the traumas. So that we don't want that. You go back to understand, to unpack, but then you look forward, bringing with you what you've learned, bringing that resilience, bringing that strength. But then you start to rewire it through, new pathways of lifestyle and thought patterns and all of that, and your affirmations and your work and your exercise and all that, to release the energy, to release the stress, to release the trauma. The body needs to release the trauma. Trauma isn't held in the brain, it's held in the body. So we need to move that out. Energy and motion. Emotion needs to be moved out. So we start to move and release and shed and let go. So then we are like the butterfly. We can begin to fly and live in a new energy, to live in a new spaciousness, to live with clearer thoughts, and to live in a space where you are more lit up and that's aligned to your truth, where there's more ease and grace and peace and less stress and strain and struggle.
I'm so glad you added that, Miriam. It actually reminds me when I had Jerry on the podcast, he was speaking about stewing in a particular period of life, and his therapist at the time called him out on it. And he's like, I'm not listening to this anymore. We're done. If you're going to keep living in this, we're done. We're done here. And that's happened to me in the past, where you're going back to try and reflect and understand, but sometimes you get stuck in it. And I love the example of the butterfly. I remember several years ago, I went through a really bad breakup, and I put the screensaver on my phone was just when the caterpillar thought it was the end of the world, it turned into a butterfly, as a reminder to move through difficult times. And sometimes we have to break down to break through. Relationships reveal where the healing or where the healing is required. A breakdown of a relationship, a breakdown of a job, a death of a loved one. These extreme events that sometimes choose us are a bit of a metaphorical wake-up call for your soul. And I have one of my check-ins, which is really funny as I kind of move into a later stage of life, you know, be 38 in December, coming into 40. Things that got me excited 10 years ago feel hollow now in my late 30s. And, you know, Carl Jung has that famous line that, you know, that we live two lives, one up to the age of 40 where we form our ego and we have all our masks, and then from 40 on we're breaking the mask down and finding our true essence, our true self. And I want to ask for soul alignment, and this is kind of a personal selfish question, but I hope it'll be helpful for everybody listening as well. I'm sure it will be, is what your check-ins are for that. For example, for me, when I get that hollow feeling, i.e. something that's status-based or success-based that once used to fill me up, extreme challenges, races, status symbols like bestseller lists and rankings, things that used to drive me heavily as a desire. Now I'm aware they were mimetic desires. They were desires I had chosen based on my social group, that these are valuable to me, but they feel a lot more hollow as I get older in life. So I check in with that and go, right, it's cool to do those things, have those things, live the process. The outcome is a byproduct of that, but it's not what's going to fill my soul up inside. So I use that as a check-in. Do you have any similar check-ins for soul alignment when it comes to I'm on path now with your relationship, with how you are as a mother, with how you are as a career and a very successful businesswoman, with how you are as a human being on the planet? Do you have a check-in for that?
Your check-in is your energy output. So how am I showing up? So if I will know red flag going up, if I'm off kilter, if I'm off balance, if my energy is off. So if I'm reactive, if I'm getting a bit cranky with the kids and snapping, if I'm tired, if I'm craving sugar, if I'm, how is your energy? So one thing I would check in at myself and try and do it myself every day is, how do I want to show up today energetically? Who do I want to be today? Do I want to be the calm mother? Do I want to be the wise one? Do I want to be the loving one? Do I want to be the gracious one? Do I want to be the strong one? How do I want to show up today? And is my energy aligned to that? And if it's not, okay, I'm off center. Or I know I've gone too much into fight, flight. I'm living in the sympathetic side too much. So that light switch has gone on. And I haven't switched it off over the last few days. So there's a compounding impact. So there's too much stress revving in the body. When my energy is off, then, or if I'm tired, Brian, I'm much more likely to default into the ego. I'll much more likely default back to old programming because I'm tired, I'm anxious, I'm overwhelmed. But then what's the root cause of that? So you have to, it's lifting the lid again to say, well, why are you tired, anxious and overwhelmed? Or I've committed to too much, or I'm not getting enough sleep, or maybe I haven't done enough exercise this week, or whatever it is. So the outside in is really important as well as the inside out, because they both help each other. But I would always say, watch my output of energy. How am I showing up? Am I angry? Am I, reactive? Am I too stressed? Am I overwhelmed? Am I like a Tasmanian devil going around craving the sugar? And how quickly am I able to drop into the parasympathetic and rest and recovery and repair? If I'm finding it harder to switch off, if I'm finding it like I need to be picking up the phone, that I need to be distracted, I know I'm running from something. I know I'm running away from something that I don't want to hear, because I know I need to hear it, but my ego is saying, no, you're grand. But the soul is saying, And thankfully, I'm able to catch that quicker. It used to be, and in the book I say sometimes and you mentioned it earlier, the soul whispers, but sometimes the soul screams enough. through a physical symptom, through an outward, like a breakdown or an outburst or something. So I would always say, you know, check in with yourself on a daily basis to see where you're at. And one thing I always try and say to myself is, what is it I need today? What is it my soul needs today? And as you mentioned earlier, it's not the big heavy hitters that you used to want to be. The things my soul nourishes and longs for and is longing for is it's those little things. It's getting into the sea. It's having the cuddles with my kids in the morning. It's going out for a walk. It's listening to some nice uplifting music. It's getting on the yoga mat. These are the things that light up my soul. These are the things that bring me back when I feel like I'm, going off and the ego is kind of taken off. And I have to ground myself, and the breath work and the meditation brings me back. Or even simple things like grounding, like getting out into the garden or getting out in nature, taking the shoes and socks off, because you're earthing yourself back to being in a grounded state. When you're ungrounded, then you'll run with the ego. So how do you ground yourself? Grounding is a wonderful way of dropping back into your essence, dropping back into your heart. And I pray. I have a very strong faith, and that really helps me. I light a candle every morning and I say a little prayer. And that just brings me back as well. It brings me back into what's important now. What's truly important in my life. Faith, family and friends. And if I'm getting too caught up in the external career or the Instagrams, that brings me back. And then you make a decision from that. What's the energy I want to live in today? So then your decisions are aligned to that. So then everything you do that day, will this choice bring me closer to that calm woman, that strong, whatever it is you want to be? If yes, do it. If no, don't do it. And it's a way of just keeping on track regularly throughout the day.
Miriam, what's your split for lighting up your soul versus avoiding things that darken your soul?
Wonderful question. Again, one way I really feel, I feel like I know if it's going to light up my soul or not, or darken it, is I will listen to the body. So the body is the vessel, but it houses the soul. So it's where the soul lives. So we do have to listen to it. So if it's a no, I'll feel it in my body. My tummy will kind of tighten. My shoulders will kind of go up towards the ears. I'll kind of start, there'll be a grasping feeling around the chest, around the lungs, around the heart. It kind of like the shoulders might round a little bit, so I'm trying to protect myself. Or the arms might get folded. My body will literally tell me if it's a yes or a no. If it's a yes, then my shoulders will drop, my chest will open, the belly will feel soft. There'll be an ease or a kind of an openness feeling to it. So that's one way you could start to check in with yourself and everybody listening, is what's a yes for you and what's a no for you. And listen to the body and see, you're going to follow its communication signals. Because the body can't speak to us verbally, but it is speaking to us every single day through signs and symptoms. So that's one way. The other way is there's just a knowingness. There's a deep knowingness of, is this aligned to my soul script? Is it a truth? And I think the more you align to your script and follow your truth through life, that gets stronger. That kind of intuition gets stronger. Or you look back and you look at decisions you've made in the past. And when you've listened to your gut, you've never been put around the wrong path. When you listen to the heart, it leads you to the destination that you need at that phase and stage of your life. When you don't listen to the heart and you listen to the ego, that's when you're often filled with regrets.
Can I ask another question? This is very specific to me at the moment. So I apologize for everyone that's listening. It's like, Brian, ask more generic questions, please. But how do you differentiate between negative programming and things that are going to darken your soul? For example, in the past, I've experienced either relationships with people, romantic or friendships, where someone would remind me of my father, for example. And we had a very tumultuous relationship for years. So I was very hesitant. Ironically, your husband, Jerry, I consider a massive inspiration for me to how to show up as a man. We're friends for years, me, you and Jerry. And how to show up. I see how he is with you. I see how he is with his career. I see how he is with his family and with your kids, and that's very inspirational to me. But there was a time when that would have repelled me because I wasn't familiar with strong men growing up who showed up that way. So it was very repellent for me. So my inside and body would do all the things you described. I would roll forward at my shoulders. I would feel a tightness in my gut, and I would be repelled by men like that because it was unfamiliar for me. Alain de Botton is that famous line that we don't seek out what's good for us, we seek out what's familiar. And I wasn't familiar with the strong man showing up in the world in a meaningful and fulfilled way for the loved ones around him. And that's not a knock on my father. We have a great relationship now, but my experience as a child was very different. We had a very different relationship. So that was negative programming for me. And it wasn't until I brought more awareness and acceptance to that I was starting to attract more strong male figures into my life, Jerry being an example. That wasn't a soul darkness for me. That was a negative programming. And again, it might be a very focus group of one individual question, but it might be useful for those listening. How do you differentiate negative programming from a soul darkness when you're trying to navigate? And that's a very Pandora's box layered question, I know, but I'd love to just kind of get your feedback or thoughts on it.
My thoughts on that is I don't believe the soul is dark at all. I believe the soul is just light. It's love. We're born with a beautiful soul that's just full of light and love. It gets darkened through the learnings and the environments that we grow into potentially and what we download. So we download negative programs between the ages, or we download any programs between the ages of 0 and 7. We're in that theta brainwave stage, hypnosis. We download, we're like sponges. That's why kids learn languages really quickly. They learn everything between those ages. So that's when we're completely downloading. But we're downloading into the subconscious mind. The soul then, no more than the ripples, gets suppressed or repressed. So the real self gets denied. But I don't think the real self ever gets darkened. I really believe what we see as an X-word bad behavior by people who are living in the most awful ways, who act out in the most terrible ways, that's all the ego. That's all the mind and the subconscious programming power. That's not the soul speaking. It's just that they've been totally disconnected and cut off from the soul, that they can't hear it. They don't listen to it. So in yoga, we talk about the energy centers of the chakras. So the 7 main chakras that run right exactly like our nervous system in the Western world. They run along the spine up to the brain, right up through that spinal column. The lower 3 energy centers are very much about living here in the now, in this earthly world. So your root chakra is big, grounded, safety, security, survival. The second chakra, sacral chakra, is about kind of flowing freely with life, but it's more pleasure, joy, that kind of stuff. Third chakra is power, it's energy, it's confidence, it's courage, right? They're the 3 lower energy centers, all connected to the soul, that allow us to stay grounded and live in this realistic earthly world. The heart then is the gateway between the lower energy centers and the higher. I hope you're staying with me, but stay with me and I'll explain where I'm going with this.
I love this, Miriam. I've never thought about the chakras like this, just for context. I love this. Is so in my wheelhouse, so keep going.
Yeah. So the heart, the 4th chakra, is the gateway that connects and bridges the lower energy centers so that we can live in this earthly world, to the higher energy centers, which are the energy centers that connect us to something bigger and greater than ourselves, to energy, to God, to universal flow, whatever you want to call it. That third eye is that gateway to seeing beyond this physical world, that intuitive space, So the higher 3 energy centers are really important to connect us to the divine. And the divine is that energy of love, that energy of just grace, of light, of purity, which is that soul energy, right? So we're all, I believe, we come in birthed with this bright light of love, which is the soul, and it just wants to shine and be as it is, unapologetically. It's just this spark of light, right? What happens in our today world is sometimes there's a spiritual bypassing, or there's a split off. So people just escape up to the higher energy centers through meditation and all of that, which is wonderful. But then there can be the spiritual bypassing. They're not living in the real world. And that's where you kind of get the woo-woo and the everything's wonderful and rosy, but they're not connected or grounded or earthed at all to the real world. Then we can have people who are completely in the lower energy centers. The heart is, as we said earlier, locked, blocked. There's no energy flowing up to the higher energy centers to connect to the divinity of grace and love and light. So they're all stuck in lower energy, earth, anger, power, drive, that more of the kind of ego energy. So in order for us to function as human beings connected to both, the heart is everything. The heart is the gateway. It's that opens us and that connects us and that allows the energy to flow up and down. Then we can ground and live here in the real world, but have that openness to that divinity, love and light. Then the soul gets nurtured, then the soul gets heard. Then we can connect to the soul, to the script, and then expand it through bringing it down into the earth to expand it to live and light and shine in this earthly world. So I don't believe the soul is ever darkened. I believe it's complete light. What darkens it is the environment that suppresses it and squeezes it and doesn't allow us to live in alignment with that truth.
What a beautiful way to wrap up, Miriam. I am going to go back on that last 3 or 4 minutes a few times because that really hit in real time in terms of just something to meditate on. And for those that are listening, you're going to be thinking of a family member or a friend straight through this podcast that, wow, they need to hear this. Take a screenshot, pop it over to them in the WhatsApp group, pop it over to them on WhatsApp, share it with anybody that you think will help. And Miriam's new book, Light Up, Energize Your Body, Awaken Your Mind, Supercharge Your Soul. We just touched on it here. If you want the full blueprint on how to live and that going from body, mind to soul and soul, body back to mind, or mind back to body, the book will be linked in the description. Miriam, for anyone that wants to follow up with you, I'll link the Instagram page. I'll obviously link out the website as well. But is there anywhere in particular you'd like to send people off the back of this podcast, or is the book still the main thing at the minute?
Thank you, Brian, so much for holding the space and allowing me to talk and share today. Yes, so Instagram, Miriam Hussey _ and then the book. But we also have a retreat coming in October the 19th to the 22nd, which is called Light Up, and it will be on the back of the book. So I'll be taking people through the essence of all the modules, but going deep in a wonderful, safe way for people can really start to kind of ask those deeper questions. 4 days, an immersive 4 days down in the Armada in County Clare. So right on the cliffs, right in the ocean, completely immersed. So a perfect environment for us to really drop into the essence of the soul and allow ourselves, I suppose, to reconnect and reharmonize and to feel that light again and start to light up.
And I will link that in the description for people below as well, because that sounds like an incredible experience for people to have. Miriam, thank you so much for what you do. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing all this wonderful education, knowledge, insight, essence, experience with us today. I'm so grateful for this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
That was Miriam Hussey on the power of listening to your soul, unblocking your heart, and living the life you were put here to live. Hopefully you got as much from today's podcast as I got. This is one I'm going to be saving and going back over several times with a notepad and pen. And today's episode was sponsored by The Circle, my online group coaching program. If you are online group coaching, group business coaching. If you run your own business, personal trainer, online coach, you work in the health, wellness or fitness space, check out that group mastermind below. There's a very special episode in there with Miriam talking about supercharging your soul and listening to your soul when it comes to what kind of business you should build, who it is you should serve. Very, very powerful bonus in there. That's everything from me from today's podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please leave a rating and a review. It helps massively with the growth of the show and allows me to bring on other great guests like Miriam to help you on your journey. That's everything from me from today. Catch you next Monday.